that, I hope everyone's excited. We have a lot to go through today, so we'll begin our presentation. So before we begin, the land acknowledgement that we'd like to do is that we live, create, and perform and make music on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam First Nations. We respect the land and honor their tradition of land acknowledgement, and this dates back centuries for Indigenous people. With this acknowledgement, we thank those Indigenous people who still live on and care for these lands. So hopefully this brings a groundedness and consciousness to this presentation and to what we continue to do with unlearning and learning moving forward. So a little bit about Creative BC before we dive in. Creative BC is an independent society created and supported by the province of BC to sustain and help grow BC's creative industries. So we help cover motion pictures, interactive and digital media, music and sound recording, and magazine and book publishing. Creative BC delivers a wide range of programs and services with a mandate to expand BC's creative economy. All right, so to anyone who is new to Amplify BC, Amplify BC programs deliver funding through 4 different streams, serving BC artists, live music presenters, music companies, and the development of the music industry. So earlier this year, in April, the government announced a renewed investment for Amplify to support the recovery and growth of BC's music industry. So we're very excited because people and companies in BC's music industry can plan into the future. We had a $22.5 million investment dedicated to the sector over the next 3 years. So Creative BC is continuing to adapt Amplify BC's programs each year to meet the changing needs of the music industry as part of BC's economic recovery. Okay, so here are Amplify BC's programs. We have music industry initiatives, Record in BC, live music, career development, and music company development, which is to launch next week. Okay, so let's get started with career development and do a little bit of a summary. And actually, I forgot to mention, if you do have a question on the current slide that we are on, you can unmute yourself if you don't want to type out your question. I believe you should have that function. Okay, so let's dive in. So the intention of the career development program is to support the economic growth and career development of emerging and established artists in the areas of sound recording, music videos, and marketing initiatives. The full program budget is $1.1 to $1.2 million. For artists, the grant amounts for emerging is between $1,000 to $10,000 and established $1,000 to $30,000. We'll be going more in detail about those categories later in the presentation. The program opened on September 1st, and we are accepting applications until the 13th of October at 11:59 p.m. The projects are occurring between April 1st of this year and December 1st, 2022. Any questions before I move on?
Hi, I have a question. My name's Sam. Thank you for doing this presentation. I just was wondering if I can apply as a permanent resident or do I have to be a citizen of Canada?
That's a great question. We'll actually be covering a little bit more in detail on that later. You can apply not being a citizen of Canada.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. No problem. All right. Anyone else before we move on? All right, let's keep going. Okay, so in terms of application materials, here is, oh, sorry, I'm seeing in the chat, is there only one deadline for the year? Yes. There is just the one deadline, October 13th. So let's go over the application materials. And again, this is all on our website under the career development page. Gina, if you want to throw the link into the chat for everyone's reference, that would be much appreciated. And that way you can follow along and see what we have available on our website. So to begin, you'll have here the program guidelines, and that is essentially the most important document that will answer all of your questions and have all of the program information. So we have the guidelines, the tip sheet, the project plan template, which we'll be going more into detail about later, the budget template, and the online application form. Additional resources that you'll find online are also the scoring sheet, the list of BC recording studios, a list of funding programs for BC artists, and these are general around Canada, as well as very shortly an offline template for applications, and lastly, grant coaching for previously unsuccessful and underrepresented artists. Thank you for dropping those links in the chat, Gina. Appreciate it. Perfect. So let's move on. In terms of the priorities for Amplify, the idea here is to increase and sustain earning potential and economic activity for BC artists, studios, recording professionals, producers, and music companies. We also want to develop audiences for BC artists locally, nationally, and internationally. We are supporting a broad range of artists, prioritizing underrepresented groups who experience systemic barriers to participation. And lastly, we are investing in the creation and marketing of intellectual property and expanding digital presence for BC artists. So let's go into what you need this funding for, what are you trying to do, and the other pieces of the program. Do we have any questions up until now? All right, let's move on. Okay, so there are 3 different groups of eligible activities, and in your application you can apply for any and all of these. It can be a mix. So the first one, sound recording. This includes singles, EPs, and LPs in the form of original music, covers, remixes, and interpretations of existing music. Recordings can be in any genre or language, including instrumental works. The program does not support commissions or the creation of new works prior to recording. The second category we have here is video production, including official music videos, pre-recorded and live-streamed performance videos, and other promo video content that supports a BC-based artists. Live-streamed videos must continue to be available after the live stream as a permanent promo asset, so it has to live online. Projects must take place in BC or engage out-of-province professionals remotely. All right, and lastly, the third activity is marketing. So this includes photography, digital media, websites, bio writing, publicity, social media marketing, or radio promo. Vendors may be Canadian or international, although hiring BC-based vendors is strongly encouraged. The program doesn't support manufacturing of merch for sale. So this is an overview of all the programs. Do we have any questions based on this slide here?
I'll just add in here, so you can apply for any combination of these 3 activities. So your project could be wholly sound recording, or a combination of recording and video, or recording and marketing. You can do 1, 2, 3, or all 3. It's up to you, depending on where you're at in your release cycle.
Perfect, thanks. Just needed to open my blind. It was getting a little dark in here. Okay, great, thanks, Sheena. So let's continue to the program updates for this year. So the program covers 100% of expenses up to the grant amount. This is a change from last year. Last year was 75%. Artists may submit one application per deadline and must self-identify as an emerging or established artist. Artists also this year is new. They can pay themselves a maximum of 15% of the grant amount for work completed in-house. So this can include self-recording, graphic design, ad campaigns, administration, and other work related to the project. So we used to have a requirement for recording in a studio in BC. This is no longer the case for this year. So you can self-record. So as written here, you can record in any studio you choose, as long as you maintain the minimum of 50% BC-based expenses overall. Okay, let's continue. All right, so continued here. The revenue benchmarks have been added in the guidelines for both emerging and established artists. It's strongly recommended that emerging artists generate a minimum of $2,000 a year, and established artists generate a minimum of $30,000 a year. And this is prior to COVID-19, and this is in order for you to be competitive in the career development program. Another few program updates: artists can claim childcare expenses for studio days, video production, or any other activities directly related to the project. And lastly, we're very excited to be offering 1-hour grant coaching sessions available for new and previously unsuccessful applicants from underrepresented groups and regions of BC. Okay. Any questions before we move on to eligibility? All right.
Hi, so I have one question.
Yes.
Hi, so I recently just started making music during the pandemic this year, so I don't meet the 2000 criteria. Could I still apply, or?
So you're still eligible to apply, but it is strongly recommended that prior to COVID, that's an element that will make you more competitive in the program for emerging artists, because this career development program is not necessarily for new artists. It's more so geared towards emerging.
Yeah.
But of course, you can still apply and demonstrate momentum in other capacities that might make your application more competitive.
Okay, thank you.
I'll jump in here as well. That $2,000 threshold is based on previous data from previous intakes of this program. So what we noticed was with successful applications, artists were generally hitting that minimum mark or exceeding it. Granted, this year is going to be quite different since a lot of artists have lost their primary streams of revenue. So that'll also be taken into consideration. We do want to support artists, who have been impacted and who have lost income as a result of the pandemic as well, versus artists who are starting out during a pandemic and may not have lost any revenue or livelihood. So that's something to also keep in mind. And then because it's been such a different year with how artists earn money, showing in your application how you're innovating, how you're pivoting, and looking for opportunities to grow your business will also be another part of the application.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheena. All right. So let's review eligibility here. Emerging and established artists may include musicians, composers, bands, and musical ensembles. The artist is the individual or group that has the creative control of the music being created and recorded, or performs and or releases music under their brand. The artist must demonstrate experience recording and releasing music, as well as performing, earning money from their music, and promoting their music online. The artist may apply as an individual or as a music company. Music companies such as record labels may apply on behalf of artists on their roster. And if that is the case, then you apply for each artist. The artist also needs to meet the BC residency requirement. So we'll go through that here. Oh, and the BC residency requirement, as in our guidelines, is 200 out of 365 days living in Vancouver, or sorry, in BC, and paying taxes in the province. Okay. Any questions about the eligibility here?
Maybe I'll add some information just on residency requirements. So we recognize, artists may have multiple residences, or maybe they travel a lot or spend time, in abroad or Nashville or touring. So if you're touring, not that anyone was touring this year, that would not deduct towards your residency. If you have multiple residences, you'd need to specify a primary residence dictated by where you pay taxes. If you recently moved to BC and are right on the cusp of meeting that requirement or not, it'd be helpful to have some additional information about when you moved here. So sometimes we ask for that at the application stage. You're also welcome to provide that in advance to discuss if you're not sure you meet the requirement or you're really close to meeting the requirement. It's always helpful to have that information provided up front.
Perfect. Thanks, Sheena. Awesome. Okay. So let's go over the emerging artist area, which is between $1,000 to $10,000 as the benchmark. So as elements of identifying as an emerging artist, here are some points that you can think of when going through the guidelines. So as an emerging artist, you should be able to provide and interpret basic audience and sales metrics. This is using your numbers online, on your website, on social media, etc. You should also have a history of recording and releasing music with a minimum of 2 songs available on a public website or platform. You should have previous revenue generation as an artist for music-related activities, whether they're paid gigs, royalties, and or merch sales. A history of performance, presenting, or distribution of works within your geographical area. And lastly, maintain an active web presence and create content affiliated to your project on a public platform.
Hi.
Hello. Do you have a question about emerging artists?
Yes, please. So myself as an artist came out in 2020, and that was during the pandemic, obviously. So I didn't have a chance to perform yet, but my streams and everything has been going pretty well online. But would that hold me back in any capacity just because of the timing, or?
So based on those details, I would say it's similar to the question that Sam had earlier. It's a benchmark that we measure competitiveness for when we score artist applications, and the jury is assessing each case. But it is definitely something that you can still apply for and essentially make prove your activity as an emerging artist. Again, it's not for new artists. This program is more geared for emerging. And as long as you can demonstrate and prove that there's momentum and that there's been a lot of growth and that you can fit into some of these areas here, of course, minus the performance history during COVID, then
streams and online following and stuff like that could make up for it.
It might, yeah. You can definitely demonstrate that in your application, yes.
And just adding to that, we support music in a lot of different genres. So you could be a film composer and you don't perform your own music. You could be we see electronic artists who are distributing music digitally, but they're not necessarily doing live shows. So there's lots of ways to have a career in music, and in the application you need to show how you are building your business in the way that makes sense for you and your music.
Okay.
Thanks, Sheena. Yeah, exactly. We'd like to just see that the business side is moving along, it's growing, and that there's potential for more growth.
Yeah, for sure. Because in like my application, I obviously mentioned about like the merchandise sales and the streams and the following. Like I do want to do a show. It's really hard to plan for one if I don't really know what the rules will be. So I wouldn't want to like say I'm gonna have a show in December and try to sell a bunch of tickets and then I can't do it.
Of course. Yeah, and we totally understand that and take all of those elements into consideration as well. So yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. So we'll move on to established. So here are some notes for the established category. And again, the benchmark for established artists for revenue is between 1,000 to 30,000. Sorry, the grant amount is between 1,000 to 30,000. So we want to see that you're demonstrating a substantial audience on social media, streaming services, or at live performances. You should have substantial earnings from music activities, including touring, licensing, publishing, streaming, and album sales. And the benchmark that we provide for established artists based on previous years is the $30,000 benchmark of earnings per year. We want to see that you're supported by one or more industry professionals, such as a label, management company, publisher, etc. That you've produced an extensive body of recorded work, commercially released with a strong, recognizable style and sound to support your brand. You should have a track record of media exposure in the form of awards, radio play, or other press. And lastly, tour history with national and or international tour date with affiliated press. Do we have any questions about the established category?
Yeah, I have a question about this. So I feel like I'm not sure which category I fall into because I'm a bass player and I freelance and I've played in a lot of different bands and those bands fit all these categories, but I would be applying for like a solo recording and I don't, as a solo artist, have all of these categories. So
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was coming up quite a bit in our questions that were being asked. And as long as you have previously released music as an artist and you have experience in that world, you can apply as a solo artist. You should still have a presence and demonstrate that you are an emerging artist in your solo act. But you are applying as a separate project. So you'd be able to apply under the emerging category.
Okay. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, so who qualifies as a BC-based artist? As mentioned earlier, artists must have resided in BC for at least 200 of the 365 days that immediately precede the date of the application. If you're a band or a group, the majority, aka 50% of the permanent performing members must meet the above BC residency requirement. Groups that have a 50-50 split will be assessed on their commitment to building a career in the province of BC. Lastly, eligible applicants must have filed income tax returns in BC in the tax year prior to the application date, if legally required to do so. Any questions about what qualifications for being a BC-based artist? All right, I think those are pretty clear. Great. So to get started on your application, an element here that we want to review is the project plan. So this is a 4-page document that you'll find on our website. You'll answer specific questions in paragraph form, and the questions in the project plan are directly related to the program evaluation criteria, which we'll review in more detail shortly. So I won't read these each one by one, but here are the 9 questions that are on that project plan document, and you'll be answering them accordingly. There are some notes as well in the project plan document that you can think about when answering these questions. Okay, any questions about the project plan before we move on to budget?
I'll just add that this is really the heart of the application. This is where you can really are going to be talking about your strategy. You're going to be talking about the items that are in your budget. This is where you talk about who you are, what you do, what makes your experience in music unique. And this plays heavily into the scoring rubric for the program. So this is probably where you will spend the most time when you're preparing your application. And you know, once you've put together your draft and answers to these questions, it's always a good idea to have a second pair of eyes on it. So if you've got another friend or another musician who's also applying, it's just always great to get some feedback from another musician who can just to share ideas with.
Totally, thanks Gina. Yeah, for this project plan, you want to share your experience, what you do, what you've learned in the past, where you see opportunities with your project that you're applying for. And as Gina mentioned, having someone look it over is always a good idea as well. Okay, let's move on. So here is a snap of the budget, Part A. So there are Part A, B, C, and D. This year the budget is broken down in different sections. So this is what the template looks like, and I'll let Gina go into more detail about how it all works and calculates. And Gina, just let me know when you're ready to move on to Part B.
Yeah, of course. So first thing, when you're putting together your budget, make sure you use the template that we've provided. We do receive quite a few applications in this program, and making sure that everyone has conceptualized their budget and completed their budget in the same way really helps us when we're evaluating. There's also some things in here that we are tracking, such as BC jobs and BC expenses. So that's why we want you to use this template. This first section is for third-party expenses, and it's separated into recording, marketing, and video. So we will also keep track of how much money is going towards recording activities for everyone who applied or everyone that's successful. That's why we have those groups. You'll put in your dates here. So this is when you're starting to work on your project and when you expect to finish. You'll want to make sure that it's within the time frame of the program for eligible expenses. We have a column here that says select expense category, and the drop down there says third party. So a third party expense is when you pay somebody else to do a job for you. And the reason we have this section here is because this year, for the first time, we have included in the guidelines a self-payment allowance for artists to pay themselves for some of the work that they're doing. So first part of the budget, it's going to be all your third-party expenses. It has to be at least 75% of your budget. Many budgets may still be 100% third-party, but keep that in mind when you're filling this out. That's what this first section is for, third-party expenses. As you go through, you'll be able to put in the amounts that you anticipate your expenses to cost. These are an estimate. You can back them up with some vendor quotes or estimates from people you want to work with. So that's something you can include as a supporting document. We don't expect it to be perfect, but we expect it to be reasonable, to be market rate, and to be a good approximation of what you think it will cost. The formulas in here will auto-calculate, so as you are going through, there are some cells that you will not be able to edit. So I have protected those cells, just having received applications where artists have written over those cells and the calculations have been incorrect. So just keep an eye out for those, but everything that you need to fill out, you'll be able to, and then it will calculate for you. So we'll go on to the next slide where we'll talk about the self-payment. So this is part B. So we have a 15% self-payment allowance. This is of the grant amount. So if you are applying for $10,000, you have the option to include in your budget up to $1,500 of work that you do to support your project. So we all know that artists wear a lot of different hats when you're making a recording or a video, or you're doing the artwork for your album. All of those things take time and energy and creativity. So we want you to use the space here if you are putting in that time and that work to be compensated for your time and creativity. So just keep in mind that maximum there, it is 15% of the grant. The other allowance in here is a 10% gear spend. So if you are needing to upgrade a microphone or upgrade some other equipment in your home space, whether that is for your recording project or for your video project, you can also claim that. This is 10% of what you're asking for in your grant. So if it's a $10,000 grant, it's up to $1,000. You might be in a situation where it's a $1,500 microphone and you can only claim $1,000. So in your budget, you would list that $1,000, even though it would be over that amount. So that's the portion that we can support in this grant. This year, different to last year, the grant covers 100% of your expenses up to the grant amount. So this is a really big deal. This is, we've never written this into the guidelines before. Usually these programs require some sort of matching investment from the artist, but this year a lot of artist revenues have disappeared. So we, absolutely acknowledge that there's not as much money to go around to go towards these projects. So for this year, projects are being funded at 100% up to the grant amount. That may change in future years, but that's what's happening here. There are a couple formulas here that, as you work through the budget, are there to help and guide you and alert you if you've gone over. So if you notice one of the formula cells is turning red, so for example, in this screenshot, BC expenses is red. It's because I haven't listed any expenses. You are required to have 50% BC expenses. So once you hit that amount, that red cell will go away. If you are struggling in Excel or struggling with the budget, please reach out to us. We can help you. We can screen share with you. We want you to be able to use this tool correctly. And yeah, hopefully it won't be too much of a challenge. There's a section at the bottom this year for revenues. Previously, if you've applied before, it was at the top. Because we're funding 100% this year, there may be less personal investment. So for this reason, it's at the bottom. If your total budget goes over what the allowable grant is, then you would need to specify how you are going to pay for the rest of the project. So sometimes this is other grants. So if you've received money from Vector or Canada Council, you would include that amount here in revenue. This could also be money from your label or just money from your own pocket, but you are committing to pay to complete the remainder of the project. Last thing I want to say here is if you are working on a Mac and you're working in numbers or another type of file, just make sure when you export it and upload it to your application that it's in an Excel document. So this helps us check the calculations. Also, all of our stuff is Windows so that we don't have to convert it. So that just saves us an extra step. And yeah, that's the budget. Whatever you put in your budget, make sure you talk about it in your project plan. the two things really go together, and they're the two very important parts of the application. So yeah, be as detailed as possible as you can with these items. I'll pass it back over to Giselle, and I'm going to pop back in the chat because I saw some other questions coming through.
Thanks so much, Gina. Yes, that was a very good overview. This budget template is super useful. Gina is a wizard and has created a very, very easy way for everyone to input their information here, have the auto calculations so that you don't need to do all the math. So yeah, if you do have any questions that are specific to the budget, please let us know. Before I move on, are there any questions right now based on the budget items? All right, let's move on. Okay, so as mentioned, applicants have to provide a detailed proposed budget for their project as part of their application and declare all expenses and sources of revenue, including confirmed and unconfirmed grants, and all expenses must be market rate. Applicants should only apply for activities that they can complete and pay for prior to December 1st, 2022. And again, artists must maintain a minimum of 50% BC-based spends for their project to remain eligible. Hiring BC vendors is strongly encouraged, and investment in BC's recording industry is considered in the scoring criteria. Projects that create jobs in BC's music industry are prioritized. So take that into consideration when putting together your budget and your team. Any questions about budget?
Yeah, I have a question. Is it more competitive to apply with a project that has already been completed within the eligible time period, or something that's upcoming?
Interesting question. Gina, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, so I'd say not in particular.
Okay.
You know, in the application, you need to talk about your strategy and what you want to achieve, and you know what success looks like for that project. We do see projects that span a longer timeline. So maybe there are some activities that have been completed and some that have not. So we want to see that you're actively working towards your goals. We also want to get credit when possible. So for example, with videos that are created as part of this program, we ask for a logo acknowledgement in the videos. So if it's already released and there's no opportunity to include credit, and it's already been made, and it's one piece of the evaluation where if it's already happened, then do they need support for this? But usually what I'd say we see most often is that there's an aspect of the project that has been in progress or has started, and that it is continuing into a longer view project. With these grants, it's about a year that people have to complete their project. You do need to think, relatively long term, especially with the amount of money that is available in the program. So it's in the application, you're going to be talking a lot about long-term goals rather than just kind of like one-off, really quick assets. Say it's more about the vision for the project as a whole, rather than if something's been completed or started or not.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Thanks, Gina. Perfect. Good question. All right, so let's move on to video treatments. So if you're applying for a music video, we want you to include a video treatment as part of your application. So this includes an artist statement, the story, the technical treatment, and visual treatment or mood board. So with these questions, you can take into consideration the storyline and, of course, referencing other video treatments online can be helpful for some inspiration and structure to work around. So this is a general idea of what is included. Okay, so application evaluation. So applications are evaluated by Creative BC staff, as well as a panel of industry professionals representing a variety of genres, industry backgrounds, regions, and demographics. Applications will be scored according to the priorities of the program using these categories here. So relevance, impact and outcomes, the financial viability and budget, diversity, equity, and inclusion, innovation, digital presence, and creative assets, and lastly, the job creation. And again, the scoring sheet is also on our website, so you can refer to that in terms of how the panel will be assessing the projects. This is what the scoring sheet looks like. So again, with each of these categories, everyone will be receiving a total score. They are each weighted differently. So as you can see, the ones with the most weight are the top two, and it goes down in descending order. So make sure that you read through the scoring sheet and go through all of these questions that each of these categories are asking in order to make your project competitive. Any questions about the scoring sheet before we go to the next slide? Okay, great. So for the application checklist, here are the requirements for all applicants. The online application form, which can be found on our website, the project plan, and make sure that you use our template. This can be a doc or a PDF, as well as the Excel budget. Again, the template is available for you online. Please use our budget. And for some applicants, the requirements are business documentation in the form of a business statement of registration, certificate of incorporation, or GST account if you're applying as a music company. The signed contract between the company and artist outlining the business relationship if the artist isn't the applicant. And for music video requests, the video treatment. And the following are recommended materials, not required, but it does make the application stronger. So expressions of support, showing industry engagement. We also have vendor quotes or estimates, tour history or upcoming performance dates. And lastly, oops, well, my closed captions are covering it, so I can't actually read after it says recent. Gina, do you have it on your end?
Well, it's actually covering mine as well, but I think it's like recent tour history, vendor quotes, expressions of support. Sometimes this can be, CVs.
Oh, there we go, recent press.
There you go. Great.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe we'll put the closed captions lower down on the slides next time. So any recent press, PR, media that you've received is, again, strongly recommended. Okay, any questions before we move on from application checklist?
Yeah, I have a question about this. Related to the question before about, so like my project is partially done, like some of it's been recorded, but I'm going to be applying for post-production costs. So like for expressions of support showing industry engagement, Gina was saying that it's like more about the overall vision of your project. So is it still helpful to have, say, letters from musical collaborators who like I've already paid and I won't be requesting funding for their fees since it happened before April 1st?
Yeah, anyone who can vouch for your work and vouch for your the quality of your work and your project in general is great. So think about it as like, you know, a reference letter, just someone that can talk about, you know, yourself as an artist, and yeah, make your application stronger that way. It doesn't have to be someone that's part of the actual project or application. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that can, okay, general reference letters are helpful there. Okay.
Exactly. Anything, yeah, that demonstrates that industry engagement and shows that you're active and you're, you know, developing as an artist, growing, etc.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey there. Hi, I don't have my video on. This is LJ.
Hi, LJ.
Hey, thanks for this information session. I'm just wondering, I've applied for a few grants throughout the pandemic. Can I reuse reference letters? Like, it's the same project, but do I have to go and get another one from the same person, or?
I don't see why not, as long as they reference you as an artist and your work as an artist. That should be fine.
Okay, great. And while I'm here, I had mentioned, asked about whether printing vinyl and CDs would be included in the eligible expenses.
Oh, any merch that you're going to sell is not eligible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep, totally. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the subject of press, I'm just releasing a song here in a couple days. It's going to be a pre-release, so I'm going to be kind of scrambling to get reviews for it, I guess, before it hits the airwaves. Is there any kind of allowance for like reviews that are very recent? Is that okay, or maybe that's a dumb question? I guess I'm just trying to figure out logistically how I get enough press coverage to kind of like make an impact. Maybe it's not a very formulated question, and I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I just jump in and say that, you know, press is a supporting document. So it's something that you have the option to include. It's not required.
Right.
And yeah, it's a piece of your online presence. So we'll also be asking for links, whether that's your website or social media. So it can be things that you're sharing on social media just to show that who your audience is, how you're engaging with them.
Maybe I can ask it in a better way. So if I have an agreement from like a zine or a radio show or something to do an interview or do whatever, but I don't have the physical interview because let's say it's not until October 20th or something after I submit the grant, can I still show that or talk about that, or how is that?
Yeah, you can talk about that.
All right, cool. Sorry for the confusing question.
No, not at all. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
Yes. Hi. Was just curious how much you will be looking at like our Spotify and our YouTube. Yeah, with the application as well.
Yeah, so the panel will be considering, you know, streaming numbers to a certain extent. It's not the end all, but we do want to show that you want to show it as an artist that you're growing and that you're developing your audience, you're staying engaged, and you're basically demonstrating that you're putting out your material and it's gaining traction. So the numbers are looked at. They're not assessed based on like the highest numbers. So it just depends on how you formulate your application and your strategy for growth as an artist.
Okay, so probably more links to what I have, the better. Is it like this kind of scenario?
Yeah, the more information you can provide us, the better, just so that we get a full picture of each application.
And I'll add to this. So because this program doesn't do any creative evaluation of your songs or recordings, it's really about demonstrating that you have an audience, and that could be you know, in a lot of different places. So wherever that is for you, however you're engaging with them, that's what you need to show in your application.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gina. All right. So for the project completion, we want you to complete the final report in order to receive the balance of funding. And here are the items that you must submit. So the online final report, which will be on our website, the detailed cost report, and that will be a template, as well as copies of all invoices and proof of payment. Lastly, the approved Creative BC and Province of BC logo with placement on your material. And there will be more details on that as well online in terms of the logo placement. So again, I want to emphasize that the deadline for this application is October 13th, and final reports will be due December 1st, 2022.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, LJ.
Hi, sorry. So for the logo, okay, so I haven't got a firm date on when I would print the vinyl and the CDs, but obviously it's 12 weeks from the October 13th date before you find out if you're awarded. So I'm trying to think of how that would work if I'm trying to print my merchandise prior to that. I guess it's not going to work, right?
That's right. So if you don't know if you have a grant yet and you've got things coming out, you would just release it. It would just release it. So you would not put a logo on something that you don't know if it's been funded or not.
Right. Okay. I might have to explore that with you guys individually later. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. All right, so for more info, you can visit the career development page on the Creative BC website. This is the link. Gina, I think, dropped the link as well in the chat earlier. So here you'll find all of the documents needed.
I have one more quick question. Is this a good time or?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, thanks. So hopefully at the time of my application, I'll have 2, possibly 3 like official releases on Spotify. I'm just rushing a couple out the door right now that are behind. Anyway, I say all that to say, does it help to have a couple additional releases on like SoundCloud or Bandcamp? And are SoundCloud, Bandcamp, that kind of thing, are they considered in the same light as Spotify, or how do you guys rank the different platforms where the releases are coming? Or are you looking more at numbers? How do you qualify and gauge those? That's what I.
Your music can be released on any platform as long as it's public. And for emerging, as long as it's 2 songs on any public platform, it can even be on a on your website. SoundCloud,
Right.
Bandcamp is totally fine. Yeah, we're not like creating a tier of streaming platforms.
Got it. Okay, so they're all kind of more or less quantified the same. I would have assumed that you guys would give more credence to like Spotify or YouTube or whatever, but that makes sense.
As long as it's public and it's online, accessible. Okay. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right, any other questions?
Hi, so I just have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
So would this be the only deadline, at least until December next year, would you say?
Yes, this is the only deadline for this year.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Could you please either revisit the video slide that talked about the artist statement and the technical treatment, et cetera, or point to where that information is found? Because I was just browsing through the PDFs on your webpage and I couldn't find exactly where that was.
Sure, yeah. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Is it in any of the documents?
I believe this one is not yet on our career development page, but we can add it up there, or you can take a screenshot for some ideas here. Yeah.
Yeah. May I also ask a question about websites and Creative BC logo acknowledgement on a website that is paid for by the application?
Sure, go ahead.
So I was a Factor Artist Development recipient, and I got one answer from them. And what I decided to do when I included the cost of a website in that application was to leave the logo acknowledgement up for the entire year of web hosting that was included in the application. And that ended before I closed the application, but that was like the whole time period that I applied for getting it covered. So if I apply for the cost of a website, for what period of time should I leave that acknowledgement on the site?
Our guidelines and our contracts don't actually specify a date or time frame. We do want to see that you've included it, and we have a logo form that you'll submit that example of how you've used the logo. it's honestly, it's something that I would not be able to monitor or keep track of the volume of things with logos and assets. So it's something, yes, we require that you include the logo, but we'll leave it in your court for the length of time that you have it on your site.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Gina. All right. Any other questions? And again, if you do have something that comes up, you can get in touch via email or set up a Calendly meeting through that link there. Okay, I think that wraps up our session today. Gina, how are you doing in the chat?
Oh, good. There's lots going on in here. It's great.
Awesome. Okay, maybe we'll give it another minute or two. What do you think?
Yeah, we can, as long as questions are still coming in and I'm answering, we'll leave the room open. So if you guys are ending your day, feel free to click out. But yeah, we're here for more questions, and I'll keep working in the chat. We'll also make this presentation available on the website afterwards, so you can reference it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of linear relationship between past applications and current applications? I ask as someone who's applied several times unsuccessfully and wants to be, I guess, looked at anew with what I'm up to now. Anything I should think about there in terms of how they're related? Like, are you guys like looking at past applications and then where things are at now, or are you just kind of taking it fresh?
Yeah, that's a great question. So applications are, each reviewed every year as they're submitted. So as a group. So when we work with our review panelists, they only have access to this year's applications. So for you as a returning applicant, the advantage you have is that you can ask. You've gone through the process before. There's opportunities where previous applicants have been able to get feedback, and then you can take that experience and what you've learned from your previous applications into your new application, and we usually see scores improve over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then one other follow-up question. You said you guys aren't looking at, or the panelists or jurors aren't looking at the songs themselves, or they're not looking at the creative of the song. They're not evaluating the creative of the songs.
Exactly.
In terms of creative, like what parts are they looking at and evaluating? Is it like image or brand, or how is that? How are you giving credence to the artistry, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily the actual like creativity in terms of the music itself, etc., but it's more so the development and growth potential of the artist, and where, like, think of yourself as a business, like where are you heading towards, what experience do you have, how viable is your idea, etc. So essentially getting to a point where you're talking about like the economics of your career as an artist, which is why career development is called what it is, and it's geared towards emerging and established versus new artists, because we want to show that you already are gaining that momentum and that you've had certain experiences before you apply.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I think are all questions answered?
I think so.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for attending and being here, showing up. That's a great first step to the process. And we are here to support you throughout. And if you have any questions, again, get in touch. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have that come up later. And Gina, thank you again for your support on the chat.
Yeah, no problem.
And again, we'll be uploading these slides to our website as well, so you can access all the information there as we go along. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your evening, everybody, and take good care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.